Well, first of all, welcome everybody. My name is Tony Epic. I'm the co-founder of Black and Brilliant, and today I'm joined by Imamu Tomlinson, MD, MBA, Vituity CEO, and Vituity Cares Foundation President. A man who has got an amazing backstory, is an amazing inspiration, and a person we can all learn from. And so, Imamu, thank you very much, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Tony, I appreciate it. Love the work you're doing. Appreciate you having me. And hopefully from this conversation, we can inspire a few people.
That's great. I appreciate that. So I really wanted to, first of all, start off by understanding your organization a little bit more before we talk a little bit about, dive into your history and what you do. Can you talk a little bit about Vituity and the foundation and what those organizations do?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit. I've two roles. I think my number one role is my number one and number two role are actually husband and father, right?
Yeah.
Try to get that out of the way, just so my wife is probably coach basketball. But as far as my professional roles, Vituity we're a national healthcare organization. We focus on providing care in emergency departments, inpatient hospitals, psychiatry, anesthesia, outpatient. So all those places you see providers that typically manage patients, we're in those places. We're in about 18, 19 states. Like I mentioned, we're across several practice lines. And really our one mission, if you had to sort of bring it down to one thing that we do, it's really to improve lives, mostly through healthcare, but really improve lives. My other my day job, if you will, is being president of the Vituity Cares Foundation. Launched only about 3 or 4 months ago. We just had a fundraiser event last night that was awesome, and just to see all those people come together. That was actually born out of Vituity, and really is a practice an emergency physician. What I've been seeing is we take care of people, we manage them for a couple minutes, a couple hours, maybe if they're really sick, and then we release them into the world. And we hope they get better and we hope they follow up. But there's so many other parts of health that we don't address, parts of healthcare mentorship that we don't address, people that are underrepresented, that are underserved, and that have, food and housing insecurity, even violence insecurity. So those are my two roles. And I've been fortunate enough to be in a position where I can really help people.
I think the question I'd also like to ask is that Vituity is a pretty major corporation. You are, and if you don't mind me saying this, you're a Black CEO, you're running a major company. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the scale of this organization? Because not everybody might be aware of this.
Yeah, the scale, it depends on how you quantify your impact on the world. Unfortunately or fortunately, many companies are gauged by the amount of revenue they bring in. So if we look at our current revenue, we're at about 1 billion with a B in revenue. So that's as far as scale. That's been pretty daunting coming in as you probably am the only Black CEO in the space. So from that standpoint, a little bit of an oddity. We take care of about 7 million patients every year. So across all these locations. We're in about 260, 270 locations, different hospitals, et cetera. So, to your point, the scale is pretty big, sometimes daunting, but I got a great team that supports me.
Wow. Okay. It's just, I think it's interesting. I think more people should know about the kind of work you're doing, the organization, et cetera. But I wanted to pivot just there and talk a little bit about most of our community, most of our network have never been a CEO before. Everybody thinks they'd like to be a CEO. If you haven't been a CEO before, if you're a person who's not a CEO, what is it that you don't know about being a CEO if you're not a CEO? What is it that you don't know until you get into that office?
Wow. If you were in person with me, unfortunately we're doing this virtually, but if you're in person, you'd see beads of sweat forming on my bald head when you mentioned that, because it's a lot of goosebumps. Going into this position, I think, was something that I never really had on my wall. And I know, a lot of my friends and peers, especially people of color, you don't always know what you can aspire to. And so I was fortunate enough to come up through an organization, had multiple roles, and eventually the board chose me to be CEO. But I think the thing I would say, that the thing I didn't know is I didn't really realize how many CEOs didn't really plan to be CEOs. That really, they just matriculated through organizations and kept saying yes. And so that's where I kind of give advice to everybody, no matter what you think you want to do, just go in and say yes when you have an opportunity along the line, vice president, board, regional director, whatever roles that may come up. And that's what I didn't realize coming up. From an organizational standpoint, the thing I didn't realize is that being a CEO is really about managing people. You can get caught up in all the particulars of your particular industry, all the widgets, all the operations. But at the end of the day, if you can connect with people, inspire people, help them to understand the mission of what's best for the organization, what's best for the people you're helping. And that's, I think, the part of the job that I learned was the most gratifying.
Yeah, got it. So it's funny then, because your history, you started off healing people. Now you're managing people. So I'd love to understand a little bit about your pathway to CEO. And sometimes I wouldn't mind, if you don't mind, me delving into this a little bit about your family background and how that journey kind of happened, because usually that's where it starts, yeah?
Oh, wow. You said this was recorded, so.
Yes, correct.
So I'll start with my family background. Of Jamaican Canadian. I'm Canadian, immigrated to the United States of Jamaican descent. So my Jamaican parents immigrated to Canada, and then I immigrated here. And so really that has given me the mindset of there's a stereotype about Jamaicans that they work 18 different jobs, and I think that's I've sort of taken that about everything I've done really. I won't give you the long history, but I basically left Canada. I was 18, went to undergrad in New York, went to medical school in Cincinnati, the Midwest, did residency there, and then came out to California, found a home with Vituity, and then matriculated up through the organization. And I think my pathway is just about, I was really intrigued that that this is called Black and Brilliant, because one of the concepts I have is about brilliance. And that, I felt like whatever job I was doing, whether it was medical school, whether it was working in a factory when I was in high school trying to get a car, it's like you just want to be brilliant in that moment. And I think that's what has helped me, just sort of come up in this particular organization, is that no matter where I'm at, I'm not even thinking about the next level or the previous level, just thinking about where I'm at and being totally brilliant in that moment.
That's amazing. Amazing. And yeah, I know that stereotypes. I got a lot of friends who had that, and then they had to make that happen as well. And, it's also a generational thing. I'm not sure if the new generations of whatever background are facing the same thing, because I think there is something that I'm finding about, I've got children myself, and I'm just like, the story, you work incredibly hard and you're trying to pass it on. But one of the things that people definitely in our membership do want to know more about is this idea of breaking through the middle. Because you talk about your focus at that moment, you're not thinking about what came before or behind or what's in front. There must have been moments in that time where you just thought, man, I think I've hit a ceiling here. And what was it that kind of helped you break through? What was it that kept you going? What was it that made no not acceptable, or feeling of resistance not acceptable?
Yeah, I hope you patent that term, because I think it's very apropos to all that, that ends up happening to people of color in those roles. You get to this proverbial glass ceiling and you can't figure out whether, you're holding yourself back or whether people are holding you back. It's sort of that quagmire of, how do I break through? Fortunately for me, I am particularly disagreeable at times. So what happened is I was sort of happy in the middle. I actually was very comfortable in the middle. I was making a good income. My region that I managed was growing. I was able to take care of a lot of patients, bring other hospitals in the fold. The people that were my direct reports, we had a great relationship, and I had a fantastic relationship with the people I reported to. So I was very comfortable. And then actually what happened is I ran for the board. Again, a partner nominated me, because that's the process. I didn't know I got nominated. I got on the Vituity board, started to learn more about the organization, got my MBA, and I was thinking, wow, I don't really want to do anything else, but if I did do something else, wouldn't it be great if I ran the company? I made that suggestion to a coach I had at the time, and he said to me, there's absolutely no way you could do that job. And so I said to him, I said, well, just humor me. What % chance do you think it is that I could have that job? And he said, less than 1%. And so that'll be the chapter in my new book, if I ever get the chance to have the time to write one. But what actually propelled me in that particular case to break through the middle was I didn't believe him. I didn't like what he said. I didn't like the fact that he said less than 1% chance, and I was going to prove him wrong. So that's how I got my little, fire through the middle, if you will.
Love it. And then just like, the next question isn't necessarily specific to you. I just think it's just a more generic question, which is like Black business leaders in general, we don't have enough of them. We all know what the issues are, but do you think there are specific ones that Black business leaders have to overcome, hurdles that they need to overcome that isn't, even that most well-meaning, why Asian colleagues maybe don't have to face?
Yeah, I think there's several. Obviously, being oftentimes in my industry, I'm the only, Black person in the room. And I really, it's almost to the point where you don't want to pay attention to it. You just want to go and do your work. But every room you go into, you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm special. And then after the fifth room, you're like, well, maybe I'm not special, but maybe there's just a paucity of other leaders. But I think that there's a concept I kind of talk about, which is the burden of ethics. As when you're the only, person in your industry, you're the only person in the room or the only person in the boardroom, you have a tendency to want to be by yourself. And I think that what I've learned through this process is that reaching out to other Black leaders in other industries, it's an opportunity to network, but it's also an opportunity to talk about the issues that you're facing, how you may or may not be treated, what's real, what's not real, how you get support. So for me, I think, feeling comfortable in reaching out to cross industry to other African-American leaders or other leaders in general, and really speaking with them about what you're feeling. Because it's very difficult sometimes to do that in your own organization for political and for, other business reasons.
So I was going to ask then, so there's there been because it sounded like, because obviously you're doing an MBA even after you graduated as a medical doctor and you've been working hard, it sounds like you migrated 2 times at least, even though because you went to New York and then you went out west. So there's been a certain element of risk taking in your career, the ability to kind of, I'm going to invest this in an MBA, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So would you say that was an important ingredient in getting to where you get to? And, and what were the biggest risks of, your career that you look back and say, it was that moment, that thing I did that made the difference?
Yeah, I agree. I think risk, going to new places, going to new countries, doing the MBA, which is sort of like, hey, I want to know more about finance. I want to know more about the financial structure behind healthcare. I think that sometimes we are a little worried about risk. Entrepreneurship is the biggest risk you can take with potentially the biggest reward. I'm sure at some point Jeff Bezos was working out of his garage, right? And so that ability to overcome risk, and it was difficult. If I can, I'll share a story. In medical school, went from New York to the Midwest. I didn't have a car, didn't know how exactly I was going to pay for it, leaning on my parents a little bit. Medical school is, you can't really work, it's like a 24-hour kind of school. And I had a lady, her name was Ivadine, and she was the dean of students. And I didn't know how I was going to pay my tuition. I was, one of the reasons I chose Cincinnati because the tuition was reasonable, but my parents were struggling. And I went to her and I said, we're not going to be able to cover, pay this. And I got a letter from the school saying I'm going to get kicked out. And Ivadine, I did this 2 or 3 times with her, and Ivadine just took the letter. She sort of quietly balled it up, and threw it in her garbage can.
Amazing.
She clicked a button on the computer and she said, "You're registered, go to class."
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, Ivadine will, forever be in my heart, right? But what I realized about that moment is that the risk you're talking about is I had to take a risk to go and ask for help. This was not an African-American lady. This was an elderly white lady who was, but she was passionate about helping me because she saw the fear and the worry in my eyes. And she just wanted me to focus on becoming a doctor. Wow. And so that, to me, I think if we would be willing in more situations to just go and take a risk, ask for that promotion, ask for that job, ask for more money, ask for, is there anything else I can do? Not worried about failure, not worried about how people are going to perceive us. So risk, as you identified, is a big one.
But you hit on another subject because, when I with the quirkiness of social algorithms and what you see in feeds on LinkedIn, I don't always see everything you post. But when I do see stuff, and it's been a little while, when I do see stuff, I always see you're socially active in the true sense of it. You're a social activist. The foundation, I feel, is that. So is it from those kinds of experiences where you feel you kind of have to pay it forward? And is there some other lessons you've learned about paying it forward? Because one of my observations in the broader community is that there isn't enough of it. There seems to be a broken link generationally around people who are pulling, as they rise, they're lifting others and passing knowledge down and connecting. And you can do that across ethnicity. It's not, your example is a perfect one. I've had similar stories as well. So I just wonder, is there something inside you that it's about passing it forward? Because that's been an important thing we've discovered in the network.
Yeah. I think part of it is from, in our former lives, we were all athletes, right? When we remember our athletic prowess a lot more fondly than it maybe was. But for me, I think it's my history in sports really lend itself to that, right? In sports, you go in the team as a freshman or as a first year or whatever the case may be, and you're always mentored and pulled up by somebody, challenged by somebody or pulled up by somebody. Being brilliant in every aspect of your life, every moment, every job, everything you do, and stopping for that moment and really understanding, how do I maximize my performance? How do I maximize my productivity or whatever I'm doing in this moment? Sometimes we already have those skills. They just need to be refined and honed, and they need a mentor to support it.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I think one of the other things I'd add to that is this idea, my wife and I talk about this quite a bit, which is this idea that there's a lot of people who want to get to the top. I'm not sure if a lot of people know what it takes to get to the top. And what I mean by that is not just knowing the pattern of how to get through that, but actually knowing how much work it is. Because it is, my wife says to me, if people knew how much time you have to put into what you do to do what you do, and just how much grit and determination and hours that burns. And everyone says, of course you got to work hard, but we don't really know how much. Because I meet so many people who say, I want to do this and do that. And I said, well, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? No, just put the work in. And sometimes you give people the chance, they don't. And so I think we're in a thing where, because we haven't seen it up close, sometimes people don't know how much grit it takes. So I have a question around that, which is just, you wear a lot of hats. You're a coach, you're a dad, you're a husband. You run 2 organizations. You also speak publicly. How do you, from wearing hats professionally and personally, balance all of the dimensions? How do you just kind of even triage that? Triage is a good word for you. So how do you make it work? You probably get complaints from all other aspects of your life that you're not spending enough time doing that, like I do. But it's like, how do you make all of that work? Because there's a secret to that. It's
a magnificent word. Triage is appropriate. I confession, I probably can be better at balance. I think what happens is that you, and I'm sure you find this also, you try to go 150 miles in every single aspect.
Yep.
And it's not humanly possible. So I think the key to that is support. And that's where I've learned over my years, and been in this role now for about, the CEO of Vituity for about 4 years. Your team, the team of support. Now that team can be your family team also, right? Your wife, your kids, we had that event for Vituity Cares last night. My whole family was there, supporting me at the event. I was running around the room when we had hit our target, and they were all happy for me. And happy for the organization. So I think understanding that when you get into these roles, if you do have direct reports, you need to go out there and find those right people for you who can support you in the areas that you're weak in. And so the balance now becomes, hey, I can go 150 miles a minute, but if I can't, I have the right team to support me. I have the right people to support me. And what you're doing is absolutely brilliant, right? The other part is that support can come from other places, and that can come from other mentors and other industries to really increase your bandwidth.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I mean, and what's interesting about that is that you are kind of almost at the crosshairs of two really big forces that have been at play this year. So in addition to everything, you also speak very publicly about, if anyone knows what's happening with COVID and particularly how it's hit our community, but just in general. And then specifically, we had George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement, and social equity, racial equity. Both of those have hit. You're right in the middle of both of those. Can you talk a little bit about how both of those have affected you? And has one had more impact than the other, or is it just the same?
Yeah, you reminded me about that with the question. I've been nervous pre George Floyd about my role in being able to speak as clearly and as concisely and as honestly as I want to. As you know, all of these roles can be somewhat political, no matter what industry you're in. And so I would always, in being Canadian, I always tended to want to walk the middle of every situation. And unfortunately, treating people well has nothing to do with politics, but somehow in America, politics has been injected into this discussion. But I think, yes, we in the organization have taken a pretty strong stance that we're here to help people. And all the things that have happened this year, especially with George Floyd, there are ways that we can make the world better, make it a better place. And so, yes, that was in our organization. Obviously, I mentioned it and talked about it, but there was so much support in the organization for making sure we treated people equitably and equally. As far as COVID, it's interesting because we're at our frontline workers. They're in the fight. They are, PPE'd up and they're taking care of patients. And so we're getting briefed, every Monday on sort of the state of coronavirus and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And I think I'm blessed with such a great team because our organization really took a lead on it. We sent providers to other parts of the country to help when they were getting inundated and really coordinated that. But this year has been my hardest year in my professional career, from an hours perspective, from a workload perspective. So it's been really tough, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel. But we're definitely I hate to use the word crosshairs, but maybe sort of the crux of these two issues have affected our industry greatly.
We appreciate you for them. And and also there could be nothing more current right now. Tuning into the news today and reading a couple of pieces. There's some concern in Black and brown communities about the vaccine and taking it. Have you got any guidance? There might be people in our network, people we all know, based on kind of history. What's your kind of guidance to people?
Right. You just have to say one word, Tuskegee, right? And everybody sort of gets... Yeah, everybody gets sort of a little nervous and, what's going on. And there's a lot of unknown. And I think with coronavirus specifically, there's a lot of unknown about it. So therefore, people fill in with what they know. The truth is that if you look at the process for creating the COVID vaccine, it's a similar process that they use for other vaccines, like the flu vaccine, et cetera. Different modalities, but these are tried and true processes. And so if you look at, say, should I take the vaccine? I think that obviously that's a personal decision based on your risk factors. But if you have hypertension, diabetes, if you have risk factors, asthma, you would be better off taking the vaccine than not taking the vaccine because of your risk profile. I think also, if you look at how long this is going to last, we're going to have to get most of the population vaccinated to make sure we can get to some kind of future normalcy. So I would encourage people, obviously you want to tell them to research it. You want to tell them to contact their doctor. You want to, go through your normal process of how you manage your medical care. But as far as a safety profile, sort of in the industry, it's as safe as the other vaccines that are out there.
That's right. That's very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. I had one final question, and this takes us almost right back to the beginning. So it's going to take you just going back to Canada psychologically, historically, and you meet a 10-year-old Imamu Tomlinson. And what would you say to him, and what advice would you give him, if any?
Oh, wow.
It's a powerful one. So you got to visualize, go back and look through those same eyes again. And there's stuff that you've experienced that you didn't know you were going to experience. And maybe you can now look back with the benefit of 20/20 vision. What would you say a little bit differently?
If I went back in the time machine, the first thing I would say is, I don't know how you made it. I was a very different person at 10 and 16, especially and 20. But I would, I was fortunate enough to be, I was mired in sports. I was like, I wanted to go to the MBA. I wanted to do all these crazy things that were probably unrealistic, but I really had an ability to put that passion into whatever I did. So the thing I would say to my 10-year-old self is just relax. It's going to be okay. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You got this. You can do it. And I don't want to go into it too much more, but I would tell the 10-year-old me to be less angry.
Okay, we get it. I think we're all a little bit like that at that age, but that's amazing. Imamu, we're so grateful for you as an inspiration, for you as a pathway that many of us can kind of look at. And so we're really grateful for you sharing your story, your insights, and your vision with us. So I just want to say thank you to that. And again, everyone, if you didn't know Imamu Tomlinson, if you didn't know, now you know. And so, so let me present again, Imamu Tomlinson, MD, MBA, Vituity CEO, and Vituity Cares Foundation President. Thank you so much for joining us today.